Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good morning. This is me, د.هاني الحسني, and that's the course of Semantics. Today we have to talk about chapter 10 in our book, Analyzing Meaning, Introduction to Semantics and Pragmatics by Bow Kroger. So we have used this book for our curriculum because it gives a lot of varieties and explanations even from other languages such as German and African languages. So the diversity included in that book can give a lot of help to people who are seeking or seek for a help or quick help to make kind of comparison studies. And in that part we need to understand indirect speech. Before we know about direct or indirect, we have to understand the comparison or the difference between direct and indirect. And in that regard we say direct speech, it means something direct and literal, so the utterances or the speaker can pronounce something, and this few words or these few words can reflect the meaning without any feeling for the hearer there is something missing in that request or in that part. And for this we have to say that direct speech can be about a kind of a question or thanking. Like here we need to understand it's almost about offering thanks, greetings, invitations, making requests, and giving orders. That's how direct speech act can be, and almost is about literal meaning of the words that are spoken. But indirect speech act, the point here that we could look for is about when you say something that needs implicature or need your what we call implicit meaning or hidden meaning. Again, to continue, in the next page we have the explanation about performatives. And when we say performatives, we have to look at Austin theory of a speech act, and the point that we notice here for performatives, we can recognize that Austin theory of speech act followed by serial theory of indirect speech act. And in that regard we could recognize that hearer listen to indirect speech acts in the same time. If you are non-native speaker, you will be hesitating about defining whether is it literal or it has different way of understanding it. Is that person requesting, or is it polite request, or we have something back or different? And that's how we could see the point when we think about both of these issues tend to be difficult for even advanced language learners. An important part of serial answer to this question, it is recognized in performatives. Performatives, it's about the direct speech, by how or by what is the way for understanding it. We need to think about the meaning. Like here, number one, to know the meaning of declarative sentence is to know what the word would have to be like for the sentence to be true. And yes, to see what's going on with Austin here, when you mention something, I name this ship the Queen Elizabeth. However, if you think that this sentence is not clear, you need to repeat again one more time. I name this ship the Queen Elizabeth. It's very clear because it's about declaration. In this regard, I bet you sixpence it will rain tomorrow. So this kind of declarative, it has what we call, it's kind of a claim, and it's not really about being sure, but not B, it's totally sure because you are giving a name for one part or for the thing that we need. Further example, I hereby sentence you to 10 years in prison. In this regard, the jury announce a punishment, which is 10 years in the jail for the suspected person. And C, I declare this meeting adjourned. And B, I now pronounce you man and wife. So this is about marriage announcement, maybe in the court. And how we can deal with it, when you look at the word hereby, declare, and pronounce, I now pronouncing, all of these words, it looked like attractive, or it looked like it can, what we call, it can be linked to understanding Austin about performatives. So when we deal with performatives, we could understand that something about statement, something about questions, and something about commands. When we need to differentiate it down, we have felicity conditions. So in the next page, felicity conditions, it's about the performative that belong to successful or valid and appropriate conditions. The identification for felicity conditions, you can read the following part here, like what there must exist an accepted conventional procedure. That's the first thing that we need to know about felicity conditions. In the same regard, we have to understand something else. The point here in A1 and A2, the particular persons and circumstances in given case must be appropriate for the invocations of the particular procedure invoked. So what do we mean in number 2 here? It's about some actions that you have to describe it, describe it in details, or how to give very special procedure for it. Number 3 or B1, the procedure must be executed by all participants both correctly and completely. So when you are trying to talk about felicity conditions, remember the participation and how the conversation it completed, or it can be totally correct and completed. The other side that we need to see here, where as often the procedure is designed for use by persons. So what do we mean by C1 here? We mean to think about person participate like rate. Sometimes we are 3 speakers, maybe 2 they are involved totally and completely with their feelings and emotions in that regard, and maybe the 3rd person will not be involved. That's why we need to think how we can recognize it, and C2 here must actually so conduct themselves subsequently. Maybe the subsequent here, how you are exchanging the role of yourself in any conversation, what time you are the leader and what time you are just normal person. And in that regard, Austin remember or remind us with examples. If a person who is not licensed to perform a marriage ceremony says, I now pronounce you man and wife, it means he's not a priest for Christianity, or he's not a religious man for Muslim people. So it will be false, or it will be untrue. Why? Because it doesn't become legally married, or as a result it will be violating C. So violating C, it's called abuses. So in C here we could find the exact person and what is the intention of each person, whether they involve in it or not in the same conversation. That's how we need to think of the felicity conditions of performatives. In the same regard, properties of explicit performatives, we could think here they always occur in indicative mood and simple present tense with non-habitual interpretation. So in that regard, the property for explicit, when we talk about explicit performative, it's about how you are clear and how you are showing an indicative mood and simple present tense. That's very important about explicit. Explicit, there is a present simple, indicative present simple. Number two, for also explicit performatives, it uses some verbs like sentence, declare, confer, invite, request, order, accuse. Number three, we normally need to know that explicit performatives in active voice, not in passive, sometimes in the passive, but this is very rare because it will be for the second or third person, not the leader of the conversation. Now, number four, performatives can optionally be modified by the performative. When you say the adverb hereby, if you are a jury in the court, you will say, I hereby announce you or sentence you to 10 years. Number six, here we have passengers are requested to talk. This kind of sentence, you can see it's not about explicit, it's about maybe implicit meaning, because it uses kind of the first one is still explicit and the last one is still explicit, but we have another part which is implicit. So explicit, we know from the active voice here, I hereby and is hereby. So we finish from the explicit. Let's move to implicit. So we have here implicit in the next page. For the implicit, when you have kind of a turning point, like what? When you have the elocutionary force, like here in the second paragraph in a page or in that page, I think elocutionary means the verb or performative verb become in the discussion or in the debate. And second point that we are looking for is all utterances have felicity conditions. Certain speech act, namely statements, also have a truth condition. So how? Let's look at the example, like all of John's children are bold. So you can describe this sentence or statement to be void or lack of reference. What do we mean by lack of reference? Because we are not sure exactly whether they are really all children, because if you become bold, it means you are too stubborn, and that's what needs a very clear like feedback about their behavior. And if John has no children, what do we need to do? So Austin here suggests a presupposition failure, which is pragmatic issue of infelicity. That's how we think about the felicity conditions. Like here we have, I promise that I shall be there, but I haven't the least intention of being there. So in that part it looks like very implicit, because you are not showing the real intention inside you when you say I promise that I shall be there. And at the same time, maybe you don't want to go, Indirect speech acts here. We have another part for indirect speech act. You can use idioms, you can use different kind of structure, like using kind of sentences. These sentences can be imperative, interrogative, and declarative sentences for the indirect speech act. That's how we need to deal with it, and we need to think about it in either ways. And at the same time, when we have your left hand, like I love your left hand, and you start talking, what really do we mean here? Left hand, is it like the real left hand, or there is a story about left hand which is a reference for it, and later we could recognize the exact left hand? And here you have to understand that the statement only the second attempt was the addressee able to work out. So you didn't get the meaning from the first recognition of this sentence or this quotation, but you get it from maybe the second full reading, and you can recognize the intended meaning of that regard or of that paragraph. And in the same time, we have to think also about the second point when we talk about your left hand, which is intended or what was intended is a cup of tea. So your left hand, it referred to a cup of tea. So he didn't mean exactly his left hand, but he meant what? He meant that the cup of tea, he requested a cup of tea. Why? Because maybe this group of people, they created kind of words they could use in their meetings or in a place that they need their privacy. That's why as a result of that, they couldn't show or reveal their hidden meaning, and they keep it implicit unless they are friends. They will know exactly what they do mean. Okay, so again, to continue here, most if not all languages have grammatical and phonological means of distinguishing at least three basic types of sentences. We have statements, questions, and commands. In the same time, in other books, you will find that statements are declarative, questions which call interrogative sentence, and commands which are imperative. So commands like when you say leave us or leave now, and statements like when you declare something, I want to do or I want to travel next week. And the questions, do you need do I have to open the door, or can you open the door, or please open the door? That's how we need to differentiate between the three types of sentence, which is statements, questions, or commands. In the same side or the same point, the case here is not about sentence. It can be declarative and interrogative and imperative. To continue, so we can see indirect speech can be rhetorical question, can be rhetorical يعني معنى مجازي. Rhetorical question is not almost the questions in indirect speech should be clear. Why? Because it's called indirect, and indirect means can be rhetoric or rhetorical question. It needs your understanding. When you say I love your left hand, not likely to work as indirect request for tea. So you don't know exactly left hand can be tea, but Cyril here proposes that in order to understand the indirect speech, you need to read the full paragraph or the whole conversation between the speakers, and then we need to think about such examples. Like we have here example in the next page, number 7. Do you have any tea? Could you possibly give me some tea? Until F, are you going to give me some tea? That's how we understand the way of questioning or asking, and how the hearer could receive it. When you recognize it, all the sentences could be understood as request for tea, but in B, it looks like more polite. Could you possibly give me some tea? Otherwise, if you look at E and F, in F, are you going to give me some tea? It looks like a kind of impatient. So impatient here means you as a person, or you as a person who announced the sentence in F, are you going to give me some tea? It looks like there is a problem, or there is emotionally kind of a problem. Later on it will be recognized if you follow or trace them. And let's move to the next page. Also in 8, we could interpret also the two sentences based on a crucial grammatical form. Do you currently have the ability to provide me with tea, and do you anticipate giving me a cup of tea? In that regard, we could recognize that these two sentences means the evidence, like, or the interpret of the request that we needed. In the same time, like here, in contrast between acceptability as request as unacceptability, you can see in 8, it's very clear it has request, and you can really understand the fundamental of the question. In 9, we could find how polite, or to what extent you become quite polite in asking or requesting the tea. So you use the word please. So please, you are here trying to make it very polite. And later we have essentially the Grayson method of calculating implicature enriched by understanding of felicity condition. The implication here also, you read the Grice issues when you ask, are you able to pass me the salt? So this kind of question is indirect, because you are trying to ask him not directly. You are trying to check out whether he will accept the offer or not, or accept the order or not. It looks like also here down the idiom, kick the bucket. Kick the bucket, it's indirect, means die. So if you didn't know the idiom, you will not really give any answer, or you will commit mistake in understanding anything. In the next page, we have also the same example that about the indirect, when we use they just kick the bucket. Old milkmaids never die, they just kick the bucket. It means they all die. They all died. Fine. The old people already died based on cereal. That's how in 13 we could understand, or we could grasp the meaning. And last, we have indirect speech acts across languages. If you look at these languages, you can see one important point here for true or false when you read. It is often difficult for non-native speakers to recognize and correctly interpret indirect speech acts in a second language. So it's not really strange if you recognize that when the native speakers say some idioms or say some words, and the other learners, as ASL learners or EFL learners, couldn't get the meaning directly. Why? We are still non-native speakers. That's why we always think about the literal translation more than think deeply about the full statement or the whole conversation. That's the challenge, and this challenge, it's a very significant point because of what? Here the reason, like when you have potential ambiguity, sometime why we couldn't give the exact meaning of indirect speech, because there will be ambiguity. Also there will be polysemy. When you have the word bank, sometimes it means exact place of the bank, and sometimes it means the side of the river, and that's really need someone totally professional who can recognize it like very quickly or rapidly, instead of waiting until he repeat many times the sentence till he figure it out that he was mistakenly said it wrongly. And that's how, in the same regard, we could think about the pragmatics inferences. That's what we call pragmatics inferences. And then in the next page, or the last, we have here an example, and this example, it's about illustrate differences in acceptable apologies between English and Hebrew. So here we have different culture. These cultures, when we need to give apology, there will be a different way of giving apologies in different cultures. Sometimes you have to bow if you are in Japan, and if you are in European culture, you need to say I'm sorry, or if you are in Israel, you just need to, like in this example, native Israel, they will say just I'm sorry and that's it. But for maybe English people, native English, they waked in, or they move into the room and try to do something until they say I'm sorry. That's how the difference between the two cultures. And maybe at the end they say maybe those people, they never apologize. I mean the Israeli or maybe African or different cultures, they try, or they never have that kind of thinking to apologize directly. At the end, we need to understand the conclusion. If we read the conclusion quickly, we have a speech act is action that speakers perform by speaking, and it has three issues here we need to trace: statements, commands, questions. We say it again, it's about declarative and imperative and interrogative sentences, or elocutionary force. In the same regard, we have explicit, performative when we talk about using direct speech act, and in the same time it uses active voice. It has present simple style of writing or speaking. At the same time, when we continue, we have to understand that indirect is almost about implication, and we need to use the Grice terms in addition to understand it. Later, all speech acts are subject to felicity condition, and felicity condition, it's about validity, successfulness, and appropriateness for the part. And if we have a successful indirect speech act, it involves literal sentence meaning. Literal sentence meaning. That's why we call it felicity condition for the primary or intended. If we have intended meaning, or someone who intend to do something, we can say it's a primary. If not, it will be what? If not primary, it will be literal. When we say here in that regard, when we say something that it intended, when we talk about intended, it means it's a primary. And when we talk about just a normal sentence, it will be indirect speech as that follow the literal meaning. So felicity condition here, you need to think about the primary one, which is intended, or the meaning that look like it's hidden, and the hidden meaning which is intended, that's what we call primary. But if it is just literal and clear, no need to think twice of it, we say it's literal. So primary, it's hidden meaning or implicit meaning. You need to think about the intention. But primary, but the literal, no need to think because it's clear. Like here, you know, like the first sentence, if we check out the discussion, we have my motorcycle is out of the shop, let's go for another ride. Here it looks like it's really a primary because I don't know exactly what he intended to do. But do you think I'm crazy? This is literal. Someone asking others, do you think I'm crazy? Maybe he did something. And that's how we understand the whole chapter. Thank you for listening to this chapter. I hope to give you more examples or details about the next one or the next chapter. I will try to upload for you kind of what we call exercise, and it's better if you answer the discussion exercises here and the homework. You can see these kind of questions could be a question in the final exam, and you can just practice and work on it. See you later, inshallah.